Alright, welcome to Random Guitar Duels, and this is the final four. If you haven't been following along, you've missed a lot. You can go back and look at the videos, and it's been an incredible series of polls so far, with a lot of comments and viewpoints and different ideas, and I'm more than happy with the way that it turned out. So we've got two more matchups here, and the first one is between two of the most innovative, exciting, memorable, legendary, iconic, innovative, groundbreaking guitarists that ever drew breath, and that is Jimi Hendrix and Eddie Van Halen. Somehow, I always suspected it might come down to this matchup when I originally started the polls, but you never know what could happen. And Eddie, on the way up, knocked out Eric Clapton and almost knocked out Jimmy Page, so he earned his way to the final four, and Hendrix never got touched by anybody. He's been skating along like the king. So what can I say about these guitarists that haven't been said? I'm going to try to come up with something. I'll give you a few quick points, and then you go vote in the poll, and make sure you vote this time. Okay, so with Eddie Van Halen, first thing that I would point out with him is that his sound was so incredibly original that the only real precedent anyone could find for it was Jimi Hendrix. But they don't really sound anything alike. And the only reason that anyone tried to compare Eddie to Hendrix is because he used feedback a little bit. He used the whammy bar, and he played in an unorthodox way. Eddie does play blues, but he's not a blues player. Eddie does sometimes use psychedelic motifs and sounds, but he's not a psychedelic player. Eddie sometimes plays clean and R&B-ish, but he's not primarily an R&B player. So he comes from a completely different point of view than Hendrix, even though he uses a Strat style guitar and he uses non-traditional musical approaches. The other thing that I would say about him, in addition to that, is that he's a multi-instrumentalist, that his keyboard playing and his guitar playing give him a depth of understanding of music that isn't necessarily present in other musicians of his generation. The third thing I'd say about him is that he has a really just an incredible right hand. Everyone talks about Eddie's left hand and how he can shred and all this. His right hand, his choice of how to strum. At the same time, he's very aggressive. He's also very laid back. You can still feel a little bit of the Clapton influence in there, the slow hand thing, even though he plays in an incredibly hyped up fashion, which makes for a very interesting combination. All right, with Hendrix, there's not much to say about Jimmy that hasn't been said before. I think the best way to put it is he's an artist that rises even beyond the genre of rock. He may even move past into being one of the greatest artists who ever lived, just in terms of being able to express what was on the inside of his heart, mind, and body, and put it to the outside in a way that everybody could totally understand for generations upon generations. We have to remember that when Hendrix was around and playing, the gear and technology was much more primitive than it is now, and even much more primitive than what Eddie started with. Another thing I would mention is that Hendrix had to overcome a racial stereotype, especially because he was a pop musician. In the 60s, there was still a lot of racial animus against black and white performers and black and white audiences mingling, stuff like this. So his music helped bring a degree of racial tolerance to the table that wasn't there before, and I think that's a pretty big accomplishment for a pop musician. The third thing that I would mention for him is that if you watch him play, he puts on an incredible stage show to go along with his playing. He has some of the best moves, some of the most imaginative ways of incorporating the guitar into his stage moves. So those would be my three things to tack on here at the end as we polish off the voting. And I know that those points are not the first ones you would think of, and they're not the most important ones. They're just the ones I'm putting on here in my second or third video on these same two guitars. So if you have anything to add, go ahead and leave a comment in the section below. Remember to like and subscribe, but most importantly, vote in the poll. Thanks a lot.